Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to another story time with Mr. Riddle. Today we're reading the story, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's an older story and a little bit longer, but I think you'll like it. It's written by Judy Barrett and illustrated by Ron Barrett. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. We were all sitting around the big kitchen table. It was Saturday morning, pancake morning. Mom was squeezing oranges for juice. Henry and I were betting on how many pancakes we could each eat. And Grandpa, he was doing the flipping. I bet you could help cook pancakes. Talk to Mom and Dad. See if they'll let you help make it. Seconds later, something flew through the air, headed toward the kitchen ceiling. It landed right on Henry. See the pancake. After we realized the flying object was only a pancake, we all laughed, even Grandpa. Breakfast continued quite uneventfully, and all the other pancakes landed in the pan. All of them were eaten, even the one that landed on Henry. I think maybe the puppy dog got to eat it. Maybe. That night, touched off by the pancake incident at breakfast, Grandpa told us the best tall tale bedtime story he had ever told. Across an ocean, over lots of huge bumpy mountains, across 3 hot deserts and 1 smaller ocean, lay the town of Chew and Swallow. In most ways, it was much like any other tiny town. It had a main street lined with stores, houses with trees and gardens around them, a schoolhouse, about 300 people, and some assorted cats and dogs. It looks like Pond Creek, doesn't it? But there were no food stores in the town of Chew and Swallow. They didn't need any. You see, the sky supplied them with all the food they could possibly want. That was the only real different thing about Chew and Swallow, was its weather. It came 3 times a day. At breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Everything that anyone ever wanted to eat came from the sky. That's interesting. Whatever the weather served, that was what they ate. But it never rained just rain. And it never snowed snow. It never just blew wind. It rained things like soup and juice. It snowed mashed potatoes and green peas. Sometimes the wind blew in storms of hamburgers. Would you like weather like that? Juice, mashed potatoes, hamburgers? The people could watch the weather report on television in the morning, and they would even hear a prediction for the next day's food. When the townspeople went outside, they carried their plates, cups, glasses, forks, spoons, and knives and napkins with them everywhere they went. That way they would always be prepared for any kind of weather. If there were leftovers, and there usually were, people took them home. They put them in their refrigerators in case they got hungry between meals. See the food coming down, catching it with plates? Oh, she has an umbrella to get something to drink. And she's catching the food. That's crazy. The menu varied. By the time they woke up in the morning, breakfast was usually coming down. After a brief shower of orange juice, low clouds of sunny side up eggs moved in, followed by pieces of toast. Butter and jelly sprinkled down for the toast. And most of the time, it rained milk afterward. Pardon. For lunch one day, Frankfurters, that's hot dogs, Frankfurters, already in their rolls, blew in from the northwest at about 5 miles an hour. There were mustard clouds nearby, and the wind shifted to the east and brought in baked beans. A drizzle of soda finished off the meal. Dinner one night consisted of lamb chops, becoming heavy at times, with occasional ketchup. Periods of peas and baked potatoes were followed by a gradual clearing, with a wonderful jello setting in the west. Oh my gosh, look at all the pork chops on the ground. And there's the jello moving in for dessert. The sanitation department, that's a cleanup department, like the trash trucks. The sanitation department of Chew and Swallow had a rather unusual job for sanitation. It had to remove the food that fell on the houses and sidewalks and lawns. The workers cleaned things up after every meal and fed all the dogs and cats. Then they emptied some of it in the surrounding oceans for the fish and turtles and whales to eat. The rest of the food was put back into the earth so the soil would become richer for the people's flower gardens. See them cleaning up all the food. A big scoop. It's like a big plate with forks and spoons. Life for the townspeople was delicious until the weather took a turn for the worse. Here's the newspaper. It says spaghetti ties up the town. Look at all that spaghetti. They can't drive their cars downtown because there's so much spaghetti everywhere. One day, there was nothing but gorgonzola cheese all day. That stinky cheese. The next day, there was only broccoli, and it was all overcooked. Oh, they don't look very happy. The next day, there were Brussels sprouts and peanut butter with mayonnaise. Yuck. She didn't want those for her birthday party, did she? Another day, there was pea soup fog. No one could see where they were going, and they could barely find the rest of their meal that got stuck in the fog. Green pea soup. It's actually pretty yummy. The food was getting larger and larger, and so were the portions. The people were getting frightened. Violent storms blew up frequently. Awful things were happening. On Tuesday, there was a hurricane of bread and rolls all day long and into the night. There were soft rolls and hard rolls, some with seeds, some without. There was white bread and rye and whole wheat toast. Most of it was larger than they'd ever seen, and the roll they'd ever seen before. It was a terrible day. Everyone had to stay indoors. Roofs were damaged, and the sanitation department was beside itself. The mess took the workers over 4 days to clean up. The sea was full of floating rolls. Oh my goodness, look at all the rolls that they put out in the sea. To help, people piled up as much bread as they could in their backyards. The birds picked at it for a while, but mostly it just stayed there and got staler and staler. The bread's getting all hard and crunchy if you leave it out very long. There was also a storm of pancakes the next morning, and a downpour of maple syrup that nearly flooded the town. A huge pancake covered the school. No one could get it off because of the weight. They had to close the school. A big giant pancake on top of the school. Lunch one day brought 15-inch drifts of cream cheese and jelly sandwiches. Everyone ate themselves sick, and the day ended with a stomach ache. Oh my goodness. Look at those piles of cream cheese sandwiches. They don't look very happy. There was also an awful salt and pepper wind that was accompanied by an even worse tomato tornado. People were sneezing themselves silly, running to avoid the tomatoes. The town was a mess. There were seeds and pulp everywhere. A tomato tornado. It's so crazy. The sanitation department gave up. The job was just too big. Everyone feared for their lives. They couldn't go outside most of the time. Many houses had been badly damaged by the giant meatballs, and stores were boarded up. There was no more school for the children, so a decision was made to abandon the town of Chew and Swallow. It was a matter of survival. You see the big donuts rolling down the street? Look, there's one stuck on the house. And big old noodles. Look, one's on his head coming down. Oh my goodness, another hamburger. And a pickle. look at that pickle stuck inside his house. I don't know if I would want food like that. That looks kind of dangerous. The people glued together the giant pieces of stale bread, sandwich style with peanut butter in the middle. See, pieces of bread. They're building. They took only the absolute necessities with them, and they set sail on their rafts for a new land. They're using the bread for a boat, and look, there's cheese slices for the sails. After being afloat for a week, they finally reached a small coastal town, which welcomed them. The bread had held up surprisingly well. It was well enough for them to build temporary houses for themselves. The bread they used for the walls and roofs of their houses. The children began school again, and the adults all tried to find places for themselves in the new land. The biggest change they had to make was getting used to buying food at the supermarket. They found it quite odd that food was kept on shelves and packaged in boxes and cans and bottles. Meat that had to be cooked was kept in large refrigerators. Nothing came down from the sky except rain and snow. The clouds were not made of fried eggs, and no one ever got hit by a hamburger again. Nobody dared to go back to Chew and Swallow to find out what had happened. They were too afraid. Henry and I were awake until the very end of Grandpa's story. I remember his goodnight kiss. Remember, Grandpa's telling a story about the town of Chew and Swallow. The next morning, we woke up to see snow falling outside our window, and we ran downstairs for breakfast. We ate a little faster than usual so we could go sledding with Grandpa. Looking out the window. We're going sledding with Grandpa. It's funny, but even as we were sliding down that hill, we thought we saw a giant pat of butter at the top of the hill. And we could almost smell mashed potatoes. Maybe it wasn't snow. Maybe it was mashed potatoes and butter. The end. I hope you liked the story. Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. I'll see you tomorrow for another story. And Cole, that's my nephew. Happy birthday. Remember, it's a trap. Take care. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.